This is a case that takes place in 2007 with a woman named Elizabeth from Miami, Florida. She was a registered nurse at a local hospital there in Florida. She had a 12-year-old son, and she'd been single for quite some time. She decided to make some profiles on some dating sites. She also made one on Arab Lounge. And when she visited Arab Lounge, she decided it wasn't a good match for her because most of the men on there were Muslims. So before she decided to delete her profile, she gets a message from a man named Saeed from Morocco. Saeed's profile said he was spiritual, so Elizabeth decides to answer back. They chat through Arab Lounge for a couple of weeks and decide to take their correspondence outside of Arab Lounge into Skype. They're on Skype. Elizabeth was able to see Saeed through video chat, found him to be quite handsome, well-educated, and well-spoken. Saeed had got his education in England, so he could speak English very well. He also worked for an American technology company outside of Rabat, Morocco. They chatted for several months, had some deep conversations, and they even talked about Christianity. Saeed was well educated with Christianity, I guess because he had read the Bible. The following year, in April, Elizabeth had some vacation time coming up from the hospital and decided to meet Saeed. In April of 2008, Elizabeth flew to Morocco and met Saeed. He arrived at the airport in a taxi and took her to his home. He had offered to host her in his family home. His family was very hospitable. They made her dinner. They had breakfast waiting for her when she got up in the morning. Saeed took some time off, some vacation time off from the company he worked for, and took Elizabeth to see the sights in Morocco. They visited the old Medina in Rabat. They went to Mohammed V, some various tourist areas around Rabat. They went to Casablanca and Marrakesh. They took the train. They took buses. They took taxis. Elizabeth had a really good time. They visited the beach. They took camel rides. Elizabeth spent 9 days in Morocco and really, really liked Saeed a lot. She flew back to America and decided to visit Saeed again in September. So it was during that time in September that she realized that she had fallen in love with Saeed. Saeed asked her to marry him, and she accepted. They had an engagement party at his family's home. They went on several more trips around Morocco, and they really got to know each other a lot better. Now, Elizabeth wanted to make sure that Saeed was not a Muslim. She wanted to make sure that he was legit, he was honest before she accepted his proposal. He made it perfectly clear that he was not a Muslim. And then she asked, well, why does your mom wear the hijab and your sister? He said, well, my parents are Muslim, but I am not a Muslim. I used to be a devout Muslim, but I'm spiritual now. And she said, well, would you be interested in Christianity? Would you ever be interested in becoming a Christian? And he goes, yes, of course. And she said, because I would really love for you to go to church with me. And so Saeed said, yes, he would be willing to become a Christian, and he would be willing to go to church with her. He also made it perfectly clear that he was not marrying her for the green card, that he loved his job in Morocco, loved being with his family. He would be willing to live with her in the United States, but would like it if she would live with him in Morocco. Well, Elizabeth didn't want to live in Morocco. She would like to go to Morocco for vacations, but she didn't want to live there. Her life and her career and her family was in the United States. So they had decided that if they got married, when they got married, he would move to the United States. So Elizabeth went back to the United States and filed for a fiancé visa for Saeed, which he paid for all of the petitions. He paid for all the filing. She didn't have to pay anything. So that was a sign for her that he was legit. So during the process, her petition on the United States file was approved. The United States side was approved, and it was sent over to Morocco. In Morocco, he was waiting to be approved, and it took months and months. He got an interview, but he never got an answer. And so Elizabeth decided to go back to United States the following year. Go back to Morocco the following year and get married. So this time she would bring her son with her, so he could meet Saeed and the family and have some vacation time also. So this was in the summer of 2009. Well, little did Elizabeth know that they were going to Morocco at the hottest time of the year during the heat wave. It was horrible. The heat was absolutely devastating. And Elizabeth and her son were just like not used to that kind of weather. Although Miami was very warm also in the summer, but the heat was nothing like it was in Morocco. So Elizabeth and Saeed got married. The imam came out to the house and performed the ceremony, and Elizabeth asked, why is an Islamic imam here performing this ceremony if you're not a Muslim? He said not to worry, that his parents were Muslim and he wanted to honor that. So she didn't think anything of it, and they signed the papers to get married. They had a beautiful wedding. She wore a traditional American wedding gown and a Moroccan gown. They had a live band. They had Moroccan traditional tagine. They did the traditional kiss on the forehead, and they ate the dates and drank the milk for fertility. Now, although Elizabeth could have children because she was in her 40s and Saeed was in his 30s, she didn't want any more children because she was getting up there in age, and she felt it wouldn't be good to have any more children. And Saeed made it perfectly clear that he didn't want any children anyway. So there was only about a 12-year difference between the two of them. So anyway, they got married. They went on their honeymoon. They went to a local hotel on the beach. They traveled to Agadir, which is a very beautiful beach tourist area. And then they traveled over to Issoria, which is a fishing village, a very old fishing village that Elizabeth fell in love with. She actually once wanted to buy a apartment there so she could go back and visit there a few times a year. So they had a beautiful time in Morocco, Elizabeth and her son, and they stayed for almost a month. And then it was time to go back to United States, and Elizabeth had to file for a spousal visa for Saeed now. So they filed for the spousal visa, and Saeed paid for the filing fees and the petition, and Saeed was called to immigration. He thought he's going to be approved, and they told him, you are actually not approved because you married, you're not approved for this fiancé visa because you married Elizabeth. And so now you're not approved and you need to file for a spousal visa. So the process had to be started all over again, and time went on, and the questioning was quite brutal, Saeed said, from the immigration officers. They accused him of using Elizabeth for the green card. They told him he was fraudulent, and they really tried to intimidate him. And Saeed was very upset about that. And but then 3 months later, Saeed was approved for the spousal visa, and he packed up his stuff and headed to America. And Elizabeth picked him up at the airport, and they began their new life together. Elizabeth's family threw her a reception for their wedding, and family and friends gathered together and was very happy to welcome Saeed into their family. And Saeed did not have a work permit yet. He was waiting for one, so he wasn't working. He was at home while Elizabeth was working. He would go to church with her, but refused to get baptized. He said it wasn't a good time. He would then travel to visit his family friends in different states, and would not bring her with him. It was during that time that Elizabeth had noticed that he had been corresponding with other women there in Florida and in different states, and that he had been talking marriage to those women also. So Elizabeth was devastated. She realized that she was just a number on his list, and that there were many women that were possible prospects of marriage just so he could come to the United States. So she questioned him, and her son questioned him. At that time, her son had turned 13, almost 14, and he had questioned Saeed also, because Saeed, her son said, "If you're not a Muslim, how come you're not eating pork?" And Saeed would say, "Because I don't like it." And then her son would say, "Yeah, right. Mm-hmm." And then Elizabeth kept questioning, kept pushing. And it was then that Saeed, because Elizabeth had told him that if you are lying, if you were trying to gain access to stay in the United States through our marriage, I will turn you into immigration. You are corresponding with these other women. You are committing adultery. And she was trying to scare him, to try to get him to fess up for him to what he was really doing with the marriage, what he really wanted to do with her. And so she was questioning him and putting pressure on him, wanting the truth to come out. And it was during that time that Saeed had a breakdown. He said he needed to go to emergency. He was crying his head off. He was banging his head on the door of their home. And he then called his family and said he wanted to go home. And he made up a story about his dad having cancer and that he needed to go back to Morocco. And he'd be back in a couple of weeks and they'd be working on their problems. Well, Saeed went back to Morocco and he never came back to the United States. He had been lying, but he was afraid that he was going to get in trouble with immigration. And so he made an excuse to go back to Morocco. It was during that time that Elizabeth filed for divorce. She put on the petition, the divorce decree, that she thought she was being used for the green card. And the only problem was that the divorce decree needed to get over to Morocco. So she sent it to Morocco, and she knew that he wouldn't sign it. And so the only proof that she needed for the judge to sign the divorce decree was that it had arrived to Saeed's house. So she showed proof that it arrived to his house, and she put on the petition that he had tried to use her. And so the judge approved her divorce, and in 2011 she was divorced from Saeed. So the whole process lasted almost 4 years of interaction with Saeed, and the marriage and the engagement and the traveling. And Elizabeth thought that it was great that she got to go to Morocco, but it was very sad that she was used by Saeed. But she was happy the way that it turned out, that he wasn't able to stay in the United States, or that he did not stay in the United States based on his marriage to her. So Elizabeth's story is a bit different than other green card frauds, but it could have ended up a lot worse. So let's continue to tell these stories. Let's continue to get the word out. Let's continue to get justice for people who are being used for the green card. During this process, there is healing that is done also by getting your story told. So if you would like your story told, if you would like me to tell it, leave your information in the comments below. Message me through Facebook. Send me your information, and I will be happy to share your story. Make good choices and do the right thing, and be cautious, because desperate people do desperate things. Bye for now.